So in the summer I made a commitment to start a prayer diary and to pray regularly for big global issues, things like the millions of people around the world living in poverty and the Christians who are persecuted for their faith. And at times I found it really difficult and discouraging because it didn't really feel like my little prayers could really change these seemingly so big situations. I didn't really believe my prayers about global warming or for Christians in North Korea could change anything. And then I met the principal of St John's College, and he told me that he had been praying for Cambodia since he was 17. And I don't know for sure, but it seems very likely that he started praying for that nation in the late 70s. And when I thought about all the things that have happened in Cambodia since then, I was really struck by how many of his prayers must have been answered. So in the last 40 odd years, there's been the fall of a brutal genocidal regime called the Khmer Rouge, an end to 2 decades of fighting along the Thai-Cambodia border, and a recent revival in that country. And presumably those are all things that David Wilkinson had prayed for. At times it must have felt like nothing he was praying was being heard. I imagine that after several years of Khmer Rouge rule with no breakthrough, it must have seemed really disheartening, as I've sometimes felt when praying for North Korea. But over 40 years later, we can see that God was at work in Cambodia and was changing things and answering his prayers, just not necessarily quickly or as he would have expected. And undoubtedly more needs to change in Cambodia, but I believe God's probably still answering his prayers, and that in 40 years' time we'll see even more fruit in that country from things that David Wilkinson's asked for. In a very similar way, I shouldn't get disheartened if my prayer for North Korea isn't answered within a week, and who knows what North Korea will look like in 40 years' time. So prayer is much bigger than I ever realised, and we can ask for really bold things, even for God to move in seemingly hopeless situations and to change whole nations. But here's the thing, if we don't pray, God can't answer our prayers. And for the last 2 months, I've not really done my prayer diary very often. And there are several reasons for this. One reason is that I've had quite a few essays and work, and I've prioritised that, which I know is stupid because I'm a first year. But yeah, and there are other times when I felt a bit tired and decided I'd rather go to bed than pray. But I should want to see movement and change in the Sudan more than I want to see movement and change in my degree, and I should care more about the uncomfortable lives of Syrian refugees than I care about my lack of comfort when I'm feeling a bit sleepy. It's time I was more generous. It's time I prioritised prayer. So I'm going to issue a practical challenge, which is as much a challenge for me as it is for you. If we're going to be generous with prayer, we should prioritise it over things we value. And there are very few things I value more than sleep. So my challenge to you, if you live in Durham, is to come along to the Just Love prayer meetings, which happen at 8 AM in Hatfield Chapel on a Friday. What is this Christian obsession with early morning prayer? It's not okay. And if you don't live in Durham and somehow this has gone viral and you're watching this, then why not just set your alarm early once a week and pick up a newspaper, read it, and pray for stories that jump out at you. If we want to see big change in the world, we have to be prepared to make time to ask for it, even if that means sacrificing things we value. Let's be generous. Let's prioritise prayer.